All right, good morning, everybody. It is pretty early. It's 9 o'clock. It's really not that early, but it's early to me. And I forgot my tripod, so that's fun. But I wanted to do a really quick wrap up for what I read in the month of June. I did a dirty chai with oat milk and an extra shot. It's giving fall. It's just so beautiful. I have indents for my sunglasses, so that's fun. Let's just talk about what I read because I have to be quick. So the first thing that I read was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This was a reread for me because I am trying to reread the entire series before Threads of Power comes out in September. So this was fantastic. It was still just as fun as I remember. I did give it a 4 out of 5 this time instead of a 5 out of 5. You have to love that, like, I'm going to be talking as people are pulling in next to me because I'm in the Starbucks parking lot, but it's fine. And I'm really excited to get into Gathering of Shadows in July because that's more of like a competition style book. There's a competition in there that's really fun to read. But anyways, if you don't know what A Darker Shade of Magic is about, it's about a man named Kel who is able to travel through 4 different versions of London. You have Red London that is full of magic and very vibrant. You have Grey London, which is essentially our London in the 1800s, I want to say. But it's basically like our reality. There's no magic. You have White London that is very hungry on magic, like it's starved of magic. It wants to control magic. And because of that, magic hides from this world, so they're suffering. And then you have Black London, which essentially doesn't exist. It's a version of London where magic completely destroyed the world and ate it. It just like consumed that entire world to where all the other Londons had to shut it off and basically close it, you know, completely away from them. And Kel basically takes something between Londons that he shouldn't take, and chaos ensues. It's so good. It's really fun. I think the characters are so well done. I just have so much fun with this series every time I read it. So 4 out of 5 stars. Loved it. Next, I listened to the audiobook for Page Boy by Elliot Page, which I highly recommend. The audiobook is narrated by Elliot, so I think that it's probably the best way to read the story, honestly, which I believe I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I may have given it a 4.5, but I think I gave it a 4. I think what I really liked about this audiobook is that you get a glimpse into how Elliot has felt his entire life as a child, how he felt out of place, and then getting to see the ways in which he was able to make himself feel more true and authentic as an adult. I thought that it was really beautiful in that sense, and there are a lot of little chapters where you get to have these really happy, special, comforting moments between Elliot and other people in his life, and I really liked that. This isn't the type of book where I feel like you're going to get a lot of like hidden secrets into different films or anything like that. So if you're going into this book trying to learn more about films that Elliot has been in, I don't necessarily think that this is going to be the book for you. I think it focuses a lot on Elliot's life and how he felt as a child, and the transitioning process and all of that stuff. The only reason that I didn't give it a 5 out of 5 stars is that I think that the book kind of suffered just a little bit with the pacing. I think it would have benefited if we would have just started with Elliot's childhood and then worked our way up to adulthood. But instead, the book was kind of all over the place, where it would be like Elliot's 3, Elliot's 25, Elliot's 7, Elliot's 3, Elliot's 27. Like, it was really all over the place. And I think it would have benefited from being more of a linear story, but that's a very minor critique. I think that it's really fun. At times it can be a little bit gross. Elliot's not afraid to talk about like poop and blood and all these like nasty things, so keep that in mind. But I really thought that it was a good book, and I'm so glad that I read it. I really don't want to talk about the next book, but the next book that I read was Mr. Magic by Kirsten White, which I gave a 1.5 out of 5 stars. And honestly, now that it's been a minute, I feel like giving it the 0.5 was a little bit generous. This is an ARC that was kindly sent to me by the publisher. Thank you, NetGalley, and thank you, I believe it was Random House, for sending me this e-ARC I wish that I would have liked it more. This story essentially follows, I believe her name is Val, and she was on a children's TV show called Mr. Magic when she was a kid, and the show was very popular and beloved, but it ended under mysterious circumstances. Val does not remember being on the show whatsoever. In present day, she is living on this farm with her dad and is living a very simple, sheltered-ish kind of life. And then her dad dies, and the cast of Mr. Magic show up at the funeral, and they're basically like, hey, we've been looking everywhere for you. We're gonna do this podcast where we talk about what happened on Mr. Magic. You should come. And she's like, I don't know who you are, and I don't know who Mr. Magic is, but sure. So she goes literally on the day of her dad's funeral to go do this podcast, but in reality, she's going with them because they know who her mom is, and she doesn't know who her mom is, so she wants to meet her mom. Without going into any spoilers, this book is half-baked. I think that's the best way to describe it. I think that it's very short in length, and I think that is where it suffers. I believe it's under 300 pages, and it feels like it. There are so many things that are just not fleshed out at all. Our characters are so one-dimensional and flat. They have no life to them, including our main character. Everything's rushed, including her decisions, and these are really big decisions that Val is making, yet she's immediately going with people she doesn't know, going into unfamiliar circumstances, especially as someone who has quote unquote been very sheltered in her life. She's not afraid to just go with a group of random people to go film a podcast for Mr. Magic, and it's just all very ridiculous. I could be on board if maybe this book was supposed to be campy and ridiculous, but it's not. It's a book that takes itself very seriously, and I think that's because it touches on the topic of religious trauma. So if you're someone who would be affected by that, it's a huge trigger warning, I would say, for religious trauma, this entire book. But because it focuses on this, I think that it's a book that's taking itself very seriously, and I can commend that. However, I believe that it takes this topic and doesn't really give it any TLC, again, because of the length. I think that it's trying, but because it's so short, you can't get invested, you can't care, and I feel like it just doesn't do the topic the justice that it needs. So overall, you just end up feeling bored. It's marketed as a supernatural thriller. I disagree. I don't think anything about this book was thrilling. There was nothing that was scary. There was nothing suspenseful about it. The supernatural elements are so confusing. I found this book to just be a giant question mark. I didn't understand what was going on a lot of the time when we get to the supernatural elements, but not only that, when we're in just with our group of friends and having discussions, again, it just feels so boring and I can't describe it. I just really didn't like this book. But I will say the main thing that I did not like is that Val has so many questions, and it's very unnatural the way that she speaks. She'll ask 6 questions in a row, which I've never heard a person do. But beyond that, nobody answers her questions. She has so many questions the entire book, and nobody will give her an answer, and that's one thing. But then she accepts that nobody gives her any answers and is like, okay, and moves on with her day. And these are very valid questions that I feel like a normal person would have, who are you, what happened to so-and-so who's dead, and people will just be like, who's hungry? And she's like, me. And it's just huh? I don't know how to describe this book. It infuriated me. And I feel like the concept is really cool, and it could have been something really well done, and it wasn't. And I'm really upset about it. Also, quick note, if you are someone who is going to end up reading this for whatever reason and you do the ebook version, there are a lot of chapters that have little Reddit threads, if you will, and they don't show up very well, at least on the arc. They don't show up very well. So I ended up having to skip all of those chapters because you couldn't read them. They were completely unreadable. So just keep that in mind. The next book I read was Office BFFs by Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey, I believe. Whoa, is that her actual name? Yeah, Angela Martin's in the show. Perfect for fans of The Office. That is all this book is about. It's about The Office. It's about their time on it, behind the scenes secrets, talking about episodes, and fun little stories shared between the cast. I listened to the audiobook because Jenna and Angela narrate it, but the really fun thing is that they kind of reward people listening to the audiobook by giving them little songs and tiny snippets from other cast members. We had like Ed Helms, who did a little banjo song, and we had Creed, who sang a song as well. It was really, really sweet. I think that if you're a fan of The Office, it was a super quick read. I learned a lot. However, if you watch the Office Ladies podcast, I've heard that pretty much everything covered in this book is covered in the podcast, so you might not get anything out of it, but I don't listen to the Office Ladies podcast, so I thought that it was really fun, and I had a good time with it, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. What's next? Oh, now we have How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, which I don't care. I loved. I can't remember if I gave it a 4 or a 5 out of 5. I'll have to insert it, but I thought that this was fun as hell, and I believe I'm unpopular in this opinion. So I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember the names of our characters. I think it's Louise. So there's Louise and Mark, their brother and sister, and their parents just died. So she flies into town to essentially handle her parents' estate with her brother, and the parents' house is haunted. So they're trying to navigate how to handle this entire situation with a haunted house that has a lot of memories in it as well. You have Mark, who is very attached to the house and the memories within it, and so he wants to take his time kind of going through all the items, and the opposite, you have Louise, who is ready to get this over with, just wants to move on, wants to get through the house as fast as possible. And so I'm sure you've already heard there are haunted puppets in this book. I thought that this book was super fun. I really did. I enjoyed all of it. The characters are unlikable. They're all pieces of crap. But so if you are someone who can't read a book, if the characters are just like bad people, I would say that no, this isn't going to be the book for you. But I found these characters to be, I found the whole book to be very camp, very funny, balls to the wall, and so I had a really good time with it. Like, I was actually very genuinely scared of the moments with the puppets. I did not know that I had a fear of like haunted dolls and haunted puppets and stuff until I read this book, because it actually genuinely scared me. I don't know, I don't understand the hate for this book. I really did think that it was a fun time, and I enjoyed every second of it, and now I've been trying to find other books that can give me that same kind of crazy fun wildness as this one did. So I guess if you have any recommendations, leave them down below. Okay, editing Caitlin here. I just wanted to add in, because I think I did a bad job at describing like why I really liked this book, and it's one of my favorites of the year so far. I also want to add in that it does touch on the topic of grief and loss, specifically between parents. So if that's something that would affect you, I feel like it's a good thing to know. However, I think that it did a really good job, like Grady did a good job of showing how different people, different personalities go through these stages of grief. Actually, the book is divided through the stages of grief as well. But I think that they do a good job of having more serious inner dialogue sometimes when it comes to how Louise and Mark feel about their parents' death. We also have Louise being a parent to a young daughter. I think she's like 5 in this book. And so you kind of go through Louise's feelings with all of this, in addition to having a daughter who has now lost her grandparents. And so she's having to describe and go through these stages of grief with her young daughter, and she wants to make sure that she's doing this responsibly. And I found that Louise and her parenting choices were also like pretty good. Like, as a parent, I felt like she did the best that she could in the situation that she was in. But I thought that this was so much fun.
And even though it does talk about these dark topics and it can get a little serious at times, in fact, there was a specific flashback to something involving an icy pond that I actually had to like skim read because it was really making me like uncomfortable with how scared I was. Even though I had those moments, it still had the campy, crazy, evil puppets mixed in. And I just really loved it. And I think that it's a book that if you keep hearing hate on, if what I've said sounds interesting, I would say still give it a try because I had heard so many bad things. So I was a little hesitant going in, but I really, really, really liked it.
And the last book that I'm going to talk to you about is Comfort Me with Apples. I listened to this on audiobook. It's very short. I believe it's like 3 hours long, and I listened to it on double speed. We essentially follow this main character named Sophia who lives in this perfect town where nothing bad happens. Doors are left unlocked. It's supposed to be kind of this oasis, if you will. And so she lives there with her husband. I'm not going to talk too much about the plot of this book because I think a lot of it is better left unsaid because it's a horror and it's supposed to be kind of confusing. But essentially Sophia finds out some information that she shouldn't, and it kind of goes from there. It's so creepy. It's so atmospheric, and I loved this. This is the kind of book that I would want to purchase. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. This is the kind of book I would want to purchase and annotate and dissect. It's so quick. It's very unnerving. I wouldn't necessarily say it's horror, but I do think that it's very suspenseful. And I would highly recommend it. It talks on like biblical themes as well, which I thought was really interesting. It has a lot to say, but it's super fast. So I would just highly recommend it. I know I'm not doing it the, justice that it deserves, but I do think that if you look up the synopsis on Goodreads, maybe it's for you. I'm currently reading The Salt Grows Heavy, and it's only 100 pages long, and I'm like halfway through it. So I am gonna count it for my July wrap up. I don't even care, but I haven't finished it yet. It's about evil mermaids, so we're just gonna leave it at that. Okay, I have to get home to my baby, and I'm so tired of filming while I am sandwiched between other cars in the Starbucks parking lot, so I'm gonna leave, but I will talk to you guys later. I'm gonna be doing the Summer Ween readathon, which I believe is next week, so I'll probably just see you guys then, but bye.